Welcome to this week's episode of SEC Shenanigans. I'm your host, Ken Shumway. It was nighttime and rainy in Death Valley, and it was lose and you're out of the playoffs for both Alabama and LSU. At first, it felt like it was going to be another penalty-ridden game for the Tide, with the first play from scrimmage being a false start. But it didn't take long for Bama to start rolling. The Bayou Bengals had no answer for the Tide. And just when it seemed as if they were mounting some sort of offense, Alabama came up with either an interception or a forced fumble and recovered it themselves. All the Tide's 6 touchdowns came on the ground, with 4 of those from Jalen Milroe breaking loose, including a 72-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter. LSU was not able to find the end zone until the final 11 seconds of the game, when the Tide had their backup players in. And LSU fans also had to join in the trash-throwing club when the Tigers were flagged for a blatant face mask call. Even though DJ Lagway was warming up during pregame, he did not play due to the hamstring injury that had him carted off the field last week. And even if he did, it couldn't have gone much worse for the Gators than it did without him. Florida went into Austin and were absolutely destroyed. The Longhorns had this game in control from the very outset. They were leading 35-0 going into the half. And it wasn't until approximately halfway through the third quarter until the Gators were able to put any points on the board. It makes one wonder if Florida's athletic director Scott Strickland has regretted his statement saying Billy Napier's job was safe. Maybe he should have waited a week or two before making that decision. And Quinn Ewers and a couple of his linemen also put on display their typical white boy dancing skills. And Lane Kiffin and the Rebels have been on the verge of making a statement win most of this season. Their 2 losses have been narrow, by less than a touchdown spread. But this week, Shaggy Smart and the Bulldogs went to Oxford and they were handed their second loss. Georgia was overwhelmed by Ole Miss's pass rush, and their defense seemed to be unable to control the Rebels, even with the second-string quarterback in. Jackson Dart did leave in the first quarter with an apparent ankle injury, but he did return before the start of the second. And even at less than 100%, the Dogs couldn't capitalize. The only bright side for Georgia in this game was the squirrel that rushed the field while he was on the run from the feds. Post-game, the fans rushed the field again, which now levies another fine against Ole Miss this season. The Dumpster Dogs went northeast to take on the Coonhounds. And while the score and stats were decidedly one-sided, touchdowns were not the dominating factor on the field. Tennessee's kicker Max Gilbert racked up 12 points with his leg. Mississippi State had just 1 less touchdown than the Vols, but their continued abysmal performance kept them out of the game and keeps them solidly at the bottom of the conference.
And I've had my share of bad reviews. I still remember my first good one, though. Everything else in this production of Our Town was simply terrible. Joey Tribbiani was abysmal.
Now, Oklahoma sought out bowl eligibility this week against the Columbia Cats. Brady Cook was out with injury from Missouri, so the Sooners had a window opportunity.
And it's gone.
The stats for this game were very close, and Oklahoma did keep the game close and even led for a while. However, a loose ball was recovered by the Tigers and returned for a touchdown with only 22 seconds left in the game, which allowed the wagon train to head back to Norman without another conference win and potentially without a postseason appearance since 1998. It was groovy on the job site this week as the Gamecocks passed their OSHA certification and went into Nashville. Vandy's mantra this season has been shock the world, but this week they were jolted themselves. It must have been Shane Beamer's anniversary because South Carolina handed the Commodores their first large loss. And by large, I mean up until this week, Vandy's previous losses haven't been by more than 3 points. But the Gamecocks didn't allow Diego to go until he scored the lone touchdown for the Commodores almost midway through the third quarter. That does it for this week's episode of SEC Shenanigans. You stay classy, SEC.